Well, it's that time of the season when all of the spring and early summer things are, for the most part, done blooming completely. I saw one coreopsis flower in my garden at home this morning. And the fall stuff, the late summer and fall things are just maybe beginning to bloom in some cases. And here's one of them. This is big leaf aster. And you can see why it's called big leaf aster or large leaf aster. They can be even almost twice that size in some patches. But this is a time of year where you start seeing the flower stalks, which grow up quite a bit taller than the leaves. They have smaller leaves on the stem, and then they're starting to open with their typical light blue aster flowers. We think of asters as being a prairie or meadow plant, sun-loving. But big leaf aster is kind of not a deep shade plant, but it likes kind of high shade, dappled shade like right here. So it's more of a plant that we'll see in wooded areas, not out in full sun. And very common in the north, very common in Door County. And at times it forms a nice ground cover, like you see right here, often denser than this. And I just started planting it at home as a ground cover in a few places. I like it that much. And the foliage stays nice all season. Then it dies back in late fall. So big leaf or large leaf aster. Probably the dominant thing in flower out in open areas right now is Queen Anne's lace. Blooms mid to late summer into fall. This large doily-like flower cluster. It's actually botanically an umbel, U-M-B-E-L, the same arrangement, same botany as plants in the onion family. It's called an umbel, but this is flat, not round. With outer, larger flowers on the outer edge that are not fertile. I think they're there to attract insects more. And then the inner flowers, which are much smaller, are the ones that form the seed. And often, not always, but often there's a darker flower, or darker structure right in the middle of the cluster. And I don't know if that attracts insects more or just what that does, but not on all. Here's one that doesn't have it. So sometimes you see that. This is also called wild carrot. This is the plant from Europe from which carrot was derived over many centuries. So this is also wild carrot. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as, in the old days, as St. Anne's lace, not Queen Anne's lace. St. Anne was, or is, the patron saint of lace makers. I think there's a St. Catherine that's also a patron. I don't know why lace makers got two of them, but I guess they did. But mostly we call it Queen Anne's lace. And growing very close to it is one that at first glance you assume is the same thing. It's not. It's much more open. This is Burnett's saxifrage, which is a horrible invasive, and that can march into wooded areas and become troublesome. Queen Anne's lace won't go into the shade, but Burnett's saxifrage can to a degree. So these two are actually two different species, not even in the same family, I don't think. So Queen Anne's lace everywhere up here, and then in some places, like in this meadow, Burnett's saxifrage. We're in the middle of the Homestead Meadow, the big meadow that you drive through going to the guest parking lot. And along with all kinds of Queen Anne's lace and Burnett's saxifrage, we have this purple flowered plant, which is spotted knapweed. And it's a non-native, like Queen Anne's lace, like Burnett's saxifrage. I wouldn't refer to it as invasive because it likes kind of unnatural. This is an unnatural plant community in Door County. This wants to be woods, and we mow it once a year to keep the trees out. It's not going to march into the woods and take over. You see it along roads, disturbed areas, along roadsides, places that are mowed. People also call it Door County heather. And of course, if you don't know much about invasive plants or weedy plants, you would think this is really nice. And it is a nice color, of course, but it is something we don't particularly want at the clearing. I'm not sure how we ever tackle it in an area the size of the Homestead Meadow, but it's been on my mind. It's called spotted knapweed because if you get a close look at the base of the flower beneath the petals, there's kind of a bulbous structure that has spots on it. So that's where it gets its name, spotted knapweed. We're at the eastern edge of where it grows in this country. It gets more prominent as you move further west toward the Rocky Mountains. So spotted knapweed here in the Homestead Meadow amongst the Queen Anne's lace and the Burnet saxifrage. Also here in the Homestead Meadow, we have not a lot of it, but here and there's a plant. This is black-eyed Susan, also called brown-eyed Susan, and that's actually a better name because it is brown, not black. And it's a nice native. Most of the things growing in the Homestead Meadow are non-native. So we do have some black-eyed Susans, some common milkweed. We have a lot of coreopsis, landsleaf coreopsis. That's long done blooming already, blooms in June. And we have a few of these, and this is one of everybody's favorite. Everybody knows this plant. It's in the aster family, at a typical aster botany or physiology or anatomy. Not a lot of it at the clearing. Wish we had more. It does tend to, an individual plant only lives a year or two, but it does reseed itself, but not a long-lived perennial. Kind of behaves almost more like an annual or a biennial. But the black-eyed or brown-eyed Susan. We're right along the road between the Homestead Meadow and the campus parking lot, and I've admired this patch of maidenhair fern, I think the whole time I've been at the clearing, which goes back 24, 25 years. It's my favorite fern, although I do love all ferns. But this is my favorite, and here it is growing in this little shove or bank of gravel. When we plow snow, a little gravel gets shoved up here. I call them gravel shoves. And we think of maidenhair fern, it looks like it's very delicate, but it's growing in this not easy location where it probably is drier than even a little ways into the woods. Might get disturbed with more gravel being shoved on top of it. So it's a lot tougher than it appears. And I've got some at home in places where I never water them and they look great. So it's not as delicate as it looks, but it's a wonderful fern. I think of all the plants that grow at the clearing, all the woodland plants, this is probably the one that's most beloved by clearing artists and people that paint and draw. It just has this wonderful architecture and this kind of a delicate appearance. Maidenhair fern. This is a baneberry or doll's eyes, which is just about to have its mature fruit, which would be kind of like a porcelain doll's eye, that kind of shiny off-white with that dot in the middle. But I actually want to show you this leaf yellowing, which is caused by high soil pH. There are quite a few plants. People think of rhododendrons and azaleas, pin oaks, hollies that require an acid or at least not a high pH soil, something below 7 ideally for their soil pH. And when the soil pH gets higher, as it often does right along the road where it's all limestone and that has a high pH, you get on some plants like this baneberry, this leaf yellowing condition. It's called, you're going to love this name, alkaline soil induced interveinal chlorosis, where just the veins remain green and the parts between the veins turn yellow. People just call it chlorosis. You don't have to use the long name. But it's caused by high soil pH, and under high soil pH, certain plants are unable to extract from the soil certain micronutrients. Iron is the big one, but also manganese, zinc, and maybe some others, but iron is the one that's most common. So it doesn't kill the plant, maybe over a long period of time it does, but this is caused by the gravel being shoved up here again, and then that leaches the alkalinity down through the soil, and certain plants show that by this chlorosis condition. This is a time of year where or when a lot of plants start showing their fruit. This is snowberry, and you can see why it has that name. These white berries, they'll stay that color from now on, and they'll often last right through the winter. Edible for people, but not palatable. Doesn't taste good at all. It looks a lot like a honeysuckle. In fact, it's in the same family as the honeysuckles. And because of that, people think it must be bad. But this is actually a native kind of understory shrub. Doesn't usually get much more than a couple feet tall, maybe 3 feet sometimes. Not particularly showy, pretty little pinkish flowers in spring, not very noticeable. Fruit, kind of hidden now, but it'll show more when the leaves fall off. Fall color, just at best a modest yellow. So not a great ornamental plant, but a nice native understory plant for natural areas. And over the course of the winter, different creatures will eat these berries. Snowberry.